Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Good news, the president, healthy, vigorous, 80 years old, fit to successfully exercise duties of the presidency, according to his physician, and the right wing lost their minds. And not surprising, not surprising. All of the craziness, all of the ageism that goes on the right is what it is. Also, sadly today, my friend John Fetterman, Pennsylvania senator, his office announced that Senator Fetterman checked himself into Walter Reed National Military Medical Center to receive treatment for clinical depression. He's receiving treatment on a voluntary basis. Look, guy went through a stroke. Guy went through something pretty serious. And what I find interesting, again, it's one of these moments where, as a country, we can't just go, you know what? I wish the best for him. I hope he comes out of this. I hope he gets the treatment that he needs. I hope he gets the help that he needs. I hope we have a system that can help. Decent people do that. I've never wished ill on someone I disagree with. Now, what I find interesting is how the right wing is spinning this. Again, we have mental health problems in this country that we need to address. Policy might be helpful, but immediately the right wing is going, well, he's got mental problems. He should resign. All of this stuff. And my favorite little spin on Senator Fetterman's condition and situation is the right-wing argument that, well, you see, this is the left abusing poor victims. And you got to love the creativity that they've come up with. That this is his wife abusing him. This is, the Democrat, or my favorite was the Democrats. Yeah, they've got to do it. They're evolving. They're coming around to new names. But I find it interesting that the argument is now because they really cared about him. They care about John Fetterman. They care about his health. They care about his mental being. Now, again, during the campaign, did they help or did they make his condition worse? The constant attacks, not just on his health, but on his character and his person. Now they care. And I got to be honest, I find it really very disingenuous. Now, from my perspective, again, I want John to get better. I've known John for 15 years. He's been a friend of the show all that time. Our heart goes out to Giselle and the kids and the family and everyone, and the hope that they get the help that they need. And here's the thing. I know John's going to get the best care possible. I know that he has the ability to get what he needs to get him back up on his feet. And I have full faith in our system to help him. Where my mind went today was, now imagine if this wasn't John Fetterman, the senator. Imagine if this was just John Fetterman, the guy who was driving the UPS truck like he did at one point, or the guy who's, out digging ditches, or the guy who's, working for a living in other jobs that, maybe they don't have insurance. Or maybe worse yet, they're underinsured and thought, hey, I'm going to be okay. At least I've got the insurance that'll cover my treatments for my illness. And if I need some mental health help, maybe some treatment for that. Sadly, most insurance plans don't. So surprise, not only are you dealing with your illness, which in his case was this stroke, you're now dealing with the fight to get the treatment that you need. And if you do have depression, if you do have problems coming out of it, then you're going to have to fight to get the care that you need because it isn't accessible to most people. This is the weird part of our system. And again, I'm told we got the best health care in the world, Rick. Don't you know it? Yeah, but here's the thing. If you can afford it. Now, I look at John and, I look at John as I look at myself. I have never been sick really in my life. I've never really had any serious ailments. Little bumps around the road, but hey, I'm a big, strong guy, going to get beyond it. John was that guy. That he was that guy who beat himself up. That was guy who was always working, always working, always working. And look, there's going to be a mental down. And I was talking about this today with some friends. And I'm going, I get the depression thing. My generation never talked about depression. It was something that we just get over it, tough it out. But there are true moments that medical conditions like this bring on depression, and that need to be treated. Especially when you're looking at somebody who's in the prime of his life, big, strong guy, walks into a room and people, oh, there's a monster over there. Now having to deal with the realities that he's not that guy anymore, the realities that he's going to have some limitations. And again, I go back to, fortunately, he has the best insurance and the best opportunity to get care. But the vast majority of us don't. And again, I go back to that. What if he was uninsured and having to fight just to get anything? What if he was underinsured and having to deal with all the bills that are going to come that, hey, I thought these were covered. Sorry, you've got co-pays and co-insurance and co-deductibles and out of pocket and out of network and out of this, out of that, out of your mind. You've got all of these things that you would have to deal with in this moment. Instead of just having a system that says, you need help? We're going to help you. Now, the Republicans have a plan, and they're very honest about it, and it fits on a bumper sticker: pay or die. If you can't afford the care, sorry, better luck next time. That's always been their plan. When they were doing the repeal and replace thing, do you remember their plans coming out? Do you remember what they were telling us at the time? Oh yeah, nothing, because they don't really have a plan. Pay or die seems like all you've got. If you can afford it, well, you get the help you need. If not, well, shame on you. And this comes back to all of our social programs. This comes back to all of the things that we depend on and hope that we can get from our government. And, I was having one of those moments where I was thinking about, actually, I was thinking about my high school government teacher, who was, I remember at the time, when I was in school going, how do you know, which political party you belong to? How do you know if you're right or left? How do you know if you're a Democrat or a Republican? How do you know that? And he explained it very simply, going, look, the reality is, in his view, it was Democrats care for the very poor. The needy, the poor, the downtrodden, the folks who are struggling to get by. Republicans care for the very wealthy, big wealthy in the corporations. And then ask the question, which do you want to pay for? Because everyone in the middle, you're going to pay for both of them. So deciding which party you belong to or which side of the fence you're on, so to speak, you've got to decide which you're okay paying for and which you want your money to go more towards or less towards. And it made perfect sense as a ninth grade student, as a 15-year-old, going, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I grew up poor. So yeah, I want to help those people. I want to help people like me. I want to help people to be able to get a hand up and to get a job and to do all those things. So someone sent me this clip today of George Carlin that I thought was just spot on accurate. And look, at the end of it, I miss George Carlin. But his commentary spot on. But here's George Carlin here, giving his take on the right and on the left and where they believe.
The difference I define the difference between right wing and left wing. People to the right of center. Well, let's start with the people to the left. People to the left of center, liberals, Democrats, populists. They're interested in people, human beings, and human values. People to the right of the line, Republicans and rich people and right wingers, they're interested in property, not people, and they're soulless. They're without soul. They don't really care. These Christians don't do Jesus' work, which is to feed the poor and take care of the ones who can't help themselves. That's what their Jesus said. Feed those who have no way. To take ones who have nothing going for them. Help them in my name. Don't even want to know about it. Where's that tax return? I want my what do they call it, the rebate?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is right there is the perfect, the perfect statement right there. And thank goodness for George Carlin, and really thank goodness for my high school government teacher, because the reality is this is where we are, and in this moment, and it's spot on accurate. So I come back to this, the fact that and again, thank goodness John's going to get the best care he can need, he deserves and needs, and we should want that. But we have a system that's saying, well, not for everybody. We've got a Republican Party that's against capping insulin prices. We've got a Republican Party that says Medicare doesn't get to negotiate for prescription drug prices. We've got a Republican Party who's just, oh my God, I can't believe you're going to hold us accountable for what we said about destroying Social Security and Medicare. And what's interesting, and we've been talking about this, we had that whole Academy Award-winning performance by Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, and really the entire Republican Party going, who, us, want to destroy Social Security and Medicare? Oh, how dare you accuse us of that thing that we've been saying for decades? And had this great moment, and good on Biden for going, okay, then this is settled, right? You're not going to do what you said you were going to do? And they're like, oh, we would never. Until, well, the next day when, the Ron Johnsons of the world come out and the Mike Pences. Mike Pence on TV said, we have to have a conversation about reforming entitlements in the days ahead. I think, he said, we can replace the New Deal with a better deal. In Social Security, you can keep all the promises you made to seniors and people who will retire in the next 20 years. No changes. But for the younger, but give options to younger Americans to invest a portion of their Social Security in private accounts. That's privatization. That's the bad thing that the Bush people wanted to do right before the economy collapsed, and everyone go, dodged a bullet there. Had we privatized Social Security before they collapsed the economy again, seniors would be SOL, really out of luck. And Mike Pence is doubling down, going, "Oh, we're not cutting. No, not for you, not for you people who would vote for me today, but screw the unborn. We're going to go after those people down the road and do what they've done masterfully. You got to give them credit. You got to give them credit. They stick to we're reforming entitlements, not destroying your Social Security, the thing that you've paid into and that you've earned. No. You've got presidential candidate Nikki Haley, who said, well, what they need to be doing is looking at entitlements. Look at Social Security. Look at Medicaid. Look at Medicare. They actually go to the heart of what's causing government to grow. And the thing, I can't get out of my mind is we're in this situation where the very people with the same type of ideology that destroyed defined benefit pensions in the workplace decades ago in the corporate world want to do it to the public sector. They want to take away that little bit of security, that little bit of safety, that little bit of, hey, I'm going to be okay in my retirement, that anti-poverty insurance that Social Security was meant to be. They want to take that away and they want to give it to their criminal friends. Wait a second, where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, George Carlin said they want to privatize Social Security so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. They want it back. They want your Social Security. And he was right, 20 plus years ago saying they're going to get it because the Republicans are never going to stop in their pursuit to do what they've done to workers in the private sector, to do to everyone in the public sphere, which is steal from you. When they talk about reforming entitlements because government's growing too much and we're spending too much on entitlements, how do you think they're going to rein in that spending? They're going to rein it in by you not getting benefits. They're going to rein it in by you paying more for what you signed up for. That's their goal, so that they can continue to give tax breaks to rich people. They can continue to hand out massive welfare programs to corporate America. And are we surprised by it? Shouldn't be. Shouldn't be at all. But my heart and my thoughts and my prayers, and here's the perfect place to go with thoughts and prayers for John Fetterman and his family as they battle to fight through this moment. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You got any questions, comments, something on your mind? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any of the program, podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So in Idaho, got lawmakers in Idaho. Evidently, they want to criminalize the COVID-19 vaccines. You got two of them introduced a piece of legislation. And look, the states are really, Republican states are, especially when they control everything, they let the cat out of the bag. They say the things that they're not supposed to say out loud, out loud. And they do it through attempting to push legislation. What they want to do is they want to charge anyone who administers the mRNA vaccine with a misdemeanor. And I got to imagine if you do it again, it ranks up to a felony perhaps, because, we're going after doctors. Whether they're vaccinating you or helping women choose what they're going to do with their bodies. We're going to start locking them doctors up. Yeah, crazy times. And look, nothing crazier than this whole balloon thing. Balloon Gate 2023. We shot down the Chinese spy balloon, which has everybody all airheaded. Let's go with that. And now we've shot down a couple other things. Today, the president gave his first national speech on this topic. Turns out the first one, Chinese spy balloon. Knew that. They knew it was a Chinese spy balloon. They followed it when it lifted off, followed it all across the country. We now find out that they were collecting data from it, jamming transmission, doing all the things that I said they were doing right from the start. They were actually doing. Because, hey, we spend $1 gazillion on military. They better. So now we've ramped up the radar. Now we want to know more because the public, the skittish public, scared of flying things. And so gave the big speech. And it turns out a lot of the things they just shot down, not Chinese and not spy balloons, but potentially, as this story goes, according to Aviation Week, one of them was an Illinois-based hobbyist club's balloon that had floated off of path. And it was shot down by 4 heat-seeking missiles launched by the U.S. Air Force on February 10th. And you go, okay, you shot down the hobby balloon. Yay, good job. The president did point out in his speech, look, there are a lot of private interests that float things in the air. For non-nefarious purposes, weather balloons and all kinds of stuff. We can't go shooting all this stuff down. Now, as I've been saying, the sad reality is we failed the Chinese test. I said from the beginning, they did this as a trial balloon to see how we would overreact. And congratulations, we failed because we had Republicans who were just losing their minds. And anything to go after Biden, anything to make Biden look bad, anything to say Biden's weak on balloons. You even had, what's her name? Marjorie Three Names. She had her little balloon like she was going to the circus. It was so cute. You could make a little doll out of it. I'm hoping those folks who make dolls and everything, if they make a train wreck balloon holding doll, I probably will buy it, or I'm hoping someone sends it to me. because you got to have that. I mean, it's a collector's item. I mean, she's not doing anything in Congress, so why not? But I do find it interesting that we're all in this tizzy, and there's part of me, and look, I'm not being conspiratorial, but there's part of me that goes, we're about to sign the largest defense budget in the history of this country. We're about ready to sign this massive defense budget where people are going, hey, the country's going broke. The debt's so Republicans losing their minds. We're going to cut Granny's Social Security and put her back on cat food. But the defense budget, sacrosanct, can't touch that because we got to be afraid of something. So there's part of me that goes, look, I remember the Cold War. I remember these kind of antics going, oh, we got to spend more on military. We need Star Wars because the Russians have all this. And we found out they didn't. But here we are in this moment. It seems odd to me that right now is when the defense budget comes through, when the balloon goes by. But we're going to pass this enormous inflated defense budget. At the same time, we're talking about cutting food stamps for low-income families. It just seems strange. I'm not making accusations. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I just think that it's strange and convenient. At a time when the president's got a goal of ending childhood hunger by 2030, we've got Republicans who are trying to end the possibility of ending childhood hunger. We've got a Republican Party that literally wants to take food out of the mouths of children. Oh my gosh, he can't believe he said that. We would never. Don't accuse us of those things that we're doing. No, we would never. No, trust us. We wouldn't steal food off the plates of children, or at least not white children. Oh, did I say that out loud? Oh yeah, the silent part. Right now, you've got the Republicans in the House moving to cut benefits for the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. Stricter work requirements, because they got that out of Clinton back in the 90s. And we've got to get those poor people to work in those crummy jobs that they can't get to. And again, means testing, all the stuff that they do, instead of saying, hey, how do we make sure that we get people good jobs? I was all in favor of ending welfare if there was a jobs component. There was a job requirement, but there wasn't a jobs program. And I said, look, I'm against welfare. I'm against handout programs. I'm a big fan of job programs. If the private sector won't, or more likely can't, or can't, or more likely won't create enough jobs for people, then the public sector's got to do something to step in. And this is where I think that public sector jobs are the way forward. Now you got the president who is advocating to ending childhood hunger. You've got the former president who's saying, no, when I get back into office, we're going to cut, 25, 50% of 75% of public employees, whatever number, I forget the number he threw up, but we're going to go after those government workers, because he knows that buzzword that really gets people all tingly in the panties and upset and angry. This is one of those moments where, you look at the SNAP program, average benefit, I think the maximum is like $230. But this is to put food on the table. These programs have helped us cut childhood poverty enormously. And yet what we've got a Republican Party hell-bent on destroying this program, because they always have wanted to. They've always wanted to take food out of the mouths of children. Are we surprised? Are we surprised when they do the things they say they want to do? Not a bit. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2011. That was the day Madison public school teachers held a sick-out in opposition to Governor Scott Walker's anti-labor assaults. Walker had introduced Assembly Bill 11, later known as Act 10. This union-busting bill proposed the elimination of collective bargaining rights for public sector workers regarding health and pension benefits, limited wage increases, eliminated dues collection, and mandated annual union recertification. Immediately, tens of thousands of protesters descended on the state capitol, chanting, "Kill the bill." and took part in hearings to voice their opposition. Area schools remained closed for days as protests continued to grow throughout the spring. While parts of Act 10 have been ruled unconstitutional in the years since, the legislation has nonetheless wreaked havoc. A series in Milwaukee's Journal Sentinel titled Act 10 at 5 examined how public school teachers have fared since the Madison uprising. They found that 75% of school districts are losing teachers, retirements have surged, less are entering the profession, and most job hop to the highest salary offers. The teachers' unions report major losses. MTEA notes that membership is down 30%. WEAC reports that membership and dues collection were cut in half. Seniority rights have evaporated and layoffs are increasingly tied to performance. Annual salary growth has slowed, stopped, or reversed. Teacher morale is low in many districts. Teachers often complain of additional unpaid duties, larger class sizes, and more performance reviews. There are new restrictions on attire as well as speech and political activities. If there is any good news, it is that unions survive annual recertification and remaining members are more active and more engaged in union work.
There are industries that occasionally do something rotten. And there are industries like big oil, big pharma, and big tobacco that persistently do rotten things. Then there is the nursing home industry, where rottenness has become a core business principle. The end-of-life experience can be rotten enough on its own, with an assortment of natural indignities bedeviling us, and good nursing homes help gentle this time. In the past couple of decades, though, an entirely unnatural force has come to dominate the delivery of aged care. Profiteering corporate chains and Wall Street speculators. The very fact that this essential and sensitive social function, which ought to be the domain of health professionals and charitable enterprises, is now called an industry, reflects a total perversion of its purpose. Some 70% of nursing homes are now corporate operations run by absentee executives who have no experience in nursing homes and who are guided by the market imperative of maximizing investor profits. They constantly demand, quote, efficiencies from their facilities, which invariably means reducing the number of nurses, which invariably reduces care, which means more injuries, illness, and deaths. As one nursing expert rightly says, it's criminal. But it's not against the law, since the industry's lobbying front, a major donor to congressional campaigns, effectively writes the law, which allows corporate hustlers to provide only one nurse on duty no matter how many patients are in the facility. When a humane nurse staffing requirement was proposed last year, the lobbying group furiously opposed it, and Congress dutifully bowed to industry profits over Grandma's decent end time. After all, Granny doesn't make campaign contributions. This is Jim Hightower saying, so, as a health policy analyst bluntly puts it, the only kind of groups that seem to be interested in investing in nursing homes are bad actors. To help push for better, contact theconsumervoice.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Oh my goodness, OMG, my head, as my kid would say. Republicans are well, they care about derailments. What's interesting is, listening to the right wing lose their mind. It's going to be, maybe it's going to be a shock to them when they find out it's their ideology that's responsible for these train derailments. Maybe it'll be a shock, or maybe they actually do know, and they're smarter than most give them credit for. That they actually know the harm that they're doing. And this is one of those cases that I talk about a lot. I ask the question, which is worse? Is it worse if someone is a true believer? They truly believe what they're doing is right, even if it's leading us down the wrong path and it leads to horrible outcomes, and there's a lot of that. Or do they know better, but they're using the true believer to get to their aims, which is deregulating, privatize, profitize, all of the things that the right stands for. Which is worse, the true believer who doesn't really know any better, but you think should, or the people who do know better, but do it anyway? I always think that the people who know better, and I look at the F channel and I look at a lot of pundits, they know better. They're just deceiving the others, the ones who are the true believers, who have drank the Kool-Aid, who have bought the soup, if you will, And this derailment thing is right there, because all you hear now from the right, since they finally found East Palestine, Ohio on the map, it's like Mecca to them now. You saw J.D. Vance there. You saw a bunch of people there. Where's the government? Where's Joe Biden? Where's FEMA? Where's that government that we hate so much? Where's that government that we want to defund? Where's that government that we don't think can do anything? Where's that government? It's amazing. It's amazing to me when conservatives get their thing in a twist, that they want government to bail them out. Every time corporate America fails, where's the government to help with a bailout? Every time their ideology fails us, it's always, well, it's out. Now, we had another derailment today in Van Buren Township, Michigan, I guess just outside of Detroit. You had one car of hazardous material that derailed. It didn't spill, it didn't explode, they didn't blow it up, but another derailment. And this is another one of those moments where you go, Norfolk Southern, what are you doing? and I come back to the fact that you look at these right-wing voices. Jim Jordan, for instance, he comes out with a tweet that says, more than a dozen trains have derailed throughout the United States this year. So much for Joe Biden's infrastructure plan. And I saw that, my head hurt. It was one of those things where I'm going, oh my God, are you that stupid? And the answer is no. Jim Jordan's a bright guy. Jim Jordan is somebody who knows how to manipulate. Jim Jordan is that guy who knows better, but does things because he knows the faithful, the dupes, the base, the maggot hats. They're going to foam at the mouth. So when his tweet goes out, more than a train, all these trains have derailed. What's Biden's infrastructure done? The infrastructure plan that he voted against. It's interesting that, again, I go back to, won't they be surprised when it's their ideology? The railroad tracks that the trains go on are not part of the government investment in infrastructure. That's paid for by the railroads. It's all of the other things that go, all of the access routes, all of the ports going in, all of that stuff that is part of the infrastructure bill. Perfect example. I'm sure everyone's seen the Instagram, TikTok, whatever video it is of the truck going over a railroad over a railroad tracks and then getting stuck because it was a low bridge, it was a low trailer going over a huge hump because the roads were lower, and he got stuck there basically teetering on the tracks, and a train hit him, and it was something to watch. Nobody really got hurt, but it's that stuff. It's those roads going up to that you fix. That's the infrastructure, not the tracks. So again, the ideology is, do you not get what it is that you stand for? Privatization? If there is problems with the tracks, it's the railroad's responsibility. It's their problem. But Jim Jordan knows that. But it's easy to go, well, where's your infrastructure bill now, Mr. Smart Guy? And the other part of this is it was just signed. A year and a half ago. It takes time to get things moving. You don't just snap your fingers and go, oh, done. We signed the bill. It's done. That was quick. Now, what I find interesting is you looked at Jim Jordan's other tweets. Will it take Joe Biden a longer time to visit East Palestine than it did for him to visit the southern border? Because he got both of them. He got the plume of smoke in there in Ohio, because the thing is that Democrats hate rural people, and the border, got to bring the border into this. Reality is, and I hate to be the one to throw this out there, but who lives in Ohio? Let's see. First, let's see who lives in Ohio. Oh yeah, Jim Jordan. When was Jim Jordan there? When did Jim Jordan talk about this first? Oh yeah, after the crazy people started making this about how can we attack Biden. Now understand how our system works, because again, conservatives, got to tell you, it's your ideology, not mine. Your ideology is absolute states' rights. So the governor has to request state of emergency, has to go through a whole process. There are processes in place. Have to request them to come in. That's part of the system. Now, we are seeing the federal government moving in there. We've seen the EPA there. And, of course, the Republicans getting their moment go, well, if the EPA thinks this water is safe to drink, maybe they should drink it. And I'm going, okay, well, here, this is where we can agree. We can come around, coalesce around the idea that things aren't safe, that these corporations pollute, that these corporations do damage, that never really gets fixed. Okay, where's your legislation to fix that? Where's your legislation to get truckloads or trainloads of water to come in to get these folks what they need? Where's your legislation? Again, you're a legislator. Your tool to fix problems is proposing legislation. That's your tool. That's what you do. But they don't have any of this. It's all about the show. It's all about the performance. Because again, it's their ideology. Their ideology has brought us here. This is 40, 50 years of neoliberal supply-side voodoo Reaganomics. This is screaming that the government can't do anything, the government shouldn't do anything. We need to privatize, profitize everything. And look, we've done a masterful job of doing that. Republicans are hell-bent on privatizing and profitizing every aspect of your life. Go to conservative states. We were in Florida over Christmas. Everywhere we went, you were digging into your pocket. Everywhere you went. You drove down the road, you got a toll. We just got the bill for our tolls while driving around Florida because we didn't have a Florida pass or a Sun Pass or what, I forget what it's called. But we had to go where you had to go, so that way you got to pay the toll. So we got the Florida tax bill and we paid it because we used the roads. I knew where I was going. But every place we went, we were digging into our pockets. You go to a public park, got to dig into your pocket. That's conservative world. That's their ideology. Their ideology is to put everything in the hands of the private sector, whose job is what? Again, understanding what the free market is, what the free market capitalism is and what it isn't, kind of important. Private businesses operate for one reason only. Enriching themselves, making money, profit, feeding the shareholders. The widgets and the whatnots that they create, secondary. And the thing is it wasn't always this way. It's when the smart people, the quote-unquote smart people, the bean counters and all the MBAs said, we can squeeze some more efficiency out of this and make some more profit. I get emails from people all the time who share their life stories with me, and I'm so grateful for that. I had a guy, today send me an email saying, about how, he worked for a small to mid-sized company, how they gave them, health care, they gave them a pension, there were Christmas parties, there were, it was a family-run business. It was a family kind of environment that people, you worked hard, but you were dedicated because the company was dedicated to you. Now, this guy is in his 70s telling me about this job that he had for years and how it was just, I guess, recently bought up by some massive conglomerate. And there's going to be no more Christmas parties. There are going to be no more, defined benefit pension funds. There's going to be none of that stuff. And this is the ideology that the right has pushed on us. And some corporate Democrats, I'm not letting them off the hook either. As a working person, both parties have kind of sucked for working people. It's just that Democrats haven't been as bad. So when I look at these stories and these people share these wonderful stories of their lives and the work that they've done and the pride that they took into it, I think back to those people I met as a kid. My grandparents' generation who, fought for good wages, for good benefits, for opportunity, who stood together and created. And, we're in this moment again, this Republican ideology of hooray for me, and the one who dies with the most toys wins, and greed is good. That Reaganomic era thinking has just pedal to the metal on steroids has infected our every thought. And I look at even this, we're still not talking about Norfolk Southern, who's had now 2 railroad derailments. We're still not talking about how we hold them accountable for the people whose lives are completely uprooted. When do we get to that? When do we get Republicans to come on board? Because look, I'm looking around and I'm seeing a lot of Democrats going, hey, we're going to hold them accountable. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to have a Pennsylvania Representative Chris DeLuzio on to talk about, because it's right near his district. We're going to talk about how he's working to get information from Norfolk Southern. We need representatives who are going to stand up for working people. We need representatives who are going to fight for average, everyday working people and not just carry the water for corporate America. Look, there's going to be a pivot here very soon from the Republicans. There's going to be. And it's going to be blamed on the worker. It's going to be blamed on government regulation. When the reality is, you go back to the Trump years, they set aside all the things the Obama folks were trying to do to stop the bomb trains and stop the kind of things that are going on. Deregulation. And how many of my Republican friends, well, deregulation's good. It's job killer. You want to regulate everybody out of work. No, I want jobs to be safe. I want people to have the opportunity when they go to work to go home at the end of the day. And fortunately, in both of these derailments, fortunately, from what I've seen, nobody has died. The one in East Palestine could have been really, really bad. These are warning signals. These are wake-up calls. These are moments to say, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again, as opposed to going, well, it's Joe Biden's fault. Or, as the one person said, Joe Biden signed an executive order. This is that moment where we as working people, we as people who live in cities and towns and in rural and in urban areas across this country should be coming together and going, you know what, I want to be safe. I don't want to have to worry about trains derailing. I don't want to worry about, things falling out of the sky. I don't want to worry about these things. I don't want to worry if my water is clean or my air is clean to breathe. I don't want to worry if my kids are going to be infected by who knows what craziness comes off these derailments. And we still don't know. But here's the bottom line. My faith and my trust is still in those government bureaucrats whose job it is to keep us safe at the EPA and other places. I will take them over corporate America any day, whose job it is to hush up, cover up, and mitigate their liability. All of these arguments come down to very simple points. And that very simple point is which side which side are you on? It's that old labor frame. Which side are you on? Are you on the side of the wealthy and the powerful and big corporations, or are you on the side of the poor and the working class? Because, as my high school government teacher said, you're going to end up paying for both of them. And in this, we probably will. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1870. That was the day the powerful labor orator Leonora O'Reilly was born to an Irish immigrant garment worker in New York City. During her lifetime, Leonora left her special mark on the labor movement as a member of some of the leading organizations of working people of her day. At age 11, she went to work at a collar-making factory. By 16, she joined the Knights of Labor. Her activism as a feminist, suffragist, and trade union organizer led her to help form a chapter for women workers as part of the United Garment Workers of America. Leonora also helped to found the Women's Trade Union League chapter in New York. Although Leonora helped to found these women's organizations, she continued to push for men's unions to open up their doors to women members. She believed it would take men and women working together to improve labor conditions. Her skill as an orator put her in great demand. At the peak of her career as an organizer, she averaged one speech a day. After giving a speech to a large union of New York telegraphers, their newsletter declared, "There is no record anywhere of a more magnificent speech than the one delivered by Miss O'Reilly." Leonora was a founding member of the organization that eventually became the NAACP. She spoke frequently about women's suffrage. In 1912, she appeared before a joint Senate committee to testify about the need for women to gain access to the ballot box, where she lived up to her fiery reputation, declaring, "You cannot and will not make laws for us. We must make laws for ourselves. We working women need the ballot for self-protection." That is all there is to it. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So Tesla evidently needs to recall, what is it, about 362,000 U.S. vehicles, I guess, to update their full self-driving beta software. I don't know if you've seen the videos that are on social media of the drunk couple. I don't know if the passed out couple. The assumption is they were drunk, who were just tooling down the highway on autopilot, passed out completely. And I'm going, I don't know how you do that. As someone who's driven, a couple million miles, I don't know how you put that kind of faith in any of this. And again, I don't know how you're going to, I don't know how as a society we're going to put faith in these kind of systems anytime soon. But there they were. The argument, I guess, is that the driver assistance system didn't meet the traffic safety laws and could actually create crashes. Tesla said that the software allows the vehicle the NTSB, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, something else. I'm remembering the story, I don't have it in front of me. That the software would allow the vehicle to exceed speed limits and travel through in intersections in an unlawful and unpredictable manner. So basically, it could just go. And, I've had people, ask me, do you think we're going to go to automated vehicles anytime soon? Going, yeah, it's coming. It's coming quickly. In fact, there was a story that Amazon is already shuttling their workers in California, I guess a mile or two from the parking lot to one of their factory, one of their distribution areas. This Zoox, I guess, is the name of the company that Amazon bought a year ago or so. But it's a startup. I guess it's about 9 years old. They have these weird looking things. No driver, no steering wheel, no ability to drive. But it's just like a car with just a box with wheels and drives you back and forth. Doesn't turn around, just goes back and forth. And I see that being the first wave. We're going to get people shuttling back and forth. You're going to see controlled routes. That's going to happen. They're going to do it to trucks. It's going to happen. They've been doing it already for a number of years, but I do see at some point them saying it's okay for trucks to get, like here where I'm at in Pennsylvania, put them on the turnpike, let them drive all the way to Chicago along the Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana pike, where there's no turns, there's not a lot of traffic, there's not a lot of turning, there's not a lot of lane changing. It just stays in the one lane like a virtual railroad. I see that happening first. And I see it happening in convoys, so people aren't cutting in and out of them and all that. I see that happening first. But eventually, in my lifetime, we probably will see, automated vehicles on the road. It's probably going to happen. And that's kind of a scary proposition. Now, on the Tesla front, I thought it was interesting. Someone sent me a comment by Joe Rogan. I haven't paid much attention to Rogan. Interesting guy, but he was talking to the Twitter Files guy on his podcast, and the clip that was sent to me, Rogan was saying how Musk was the hero of the left, of the progressives, and because of the electric car stuff. And I go, I don't remember him being the hero of the left. I mean, he wasn't my hero. He was a billionaire, and I am extraordinarily distrustful of the kind of massive wealth accumulation that you see in the hands of Musk and Bezos and Gates and Buffett and the rest of them. I don't think that is good for society. I don't think it's good for a democracy. I don't think it's good for society to have someone with that kind of power. And if you look at what Musk is doing at Twitter, and this was his argument, that he's opening up Twitter. Twitter's now a free speech zone, so people can say all the horrible things that they feel that they're being bottled up. And I look at some of the comments that people send to me, and I don't spend a lot of time on the trolls, but vile stuff. And as I've said, social media allows people to be the worst versions of themselves. And you see that time and time and time again. But I found it interesting that Rogan took the position that, well, the left used to love him, but now that he's destroyed Twitter, the left hates him, says he's Hitler. And I'm going, really? Did I miss that part of the conversation? And look, I'm not saying that there's no one out there saying, there are probably fringe elements saying this kind of stuff, but it's not the progressive left as a whole. I think most people, I think the mass of society is where I'm at, distrustful of the kind of wealth and power that we give individuals over our policies. That's what's frightening to me. If he's mean to people on Twitter, I don't care about that. But it's the power that they wield because of the wealth that they have. That's the kind of thing that's a little concerning. And the weird thing is I look at the fact that Republicans, doing the Twitter things, because the Twitter files, they seem really silent on Musk manipulating Twitter for his own purposes. It's really kind of bizarre if you think about it. Now, again, their ideology tells us that they believe private corporations should be able to do whatever they want to do. That's what they tell us they believe, unless it affects them. And then we're gonna have hearings. We're gonna have all kinds of craziness. In fact, evidently they're going to be taking the show on the road to have blockbuster hearings all over the place. But I look at this, and we're in this weird moment where you've got people who are pushing this ideology, and rewriting kind of history, going, oh, the left loved Musk, and now they hate him because of Twitter. And you go, no, I don't know that they really loved him. I think they loved the electric car. Him, not so much. But it's interesting on how the messaging gets wrapped up. And as I said, the sad reality is social media is the place where people are the worst versions of themselves. And these a lot of podcasts are the same thing. But I look at some of the stuff that's being thrown out there. For instance, Nikki Haley's running for president. Ann Coulter, went on this rant about how Nikki Haley should go back to where I think the exact quote was, "Go back to your own country," was her thing. She was born in South Carolina. Now, again, these are moments where we want to say what we want to say without being held accountable for it. I look at some of the stuff that gets thrown back at me on Twitter for just attacks for no reason. I don't hear the Republicans talking about that. It's this victim game they play, and they do it very well. They did it with the IRS too. The narrative was, and they've got a powerful megaphone, the narrative was that the IRS was targeting conservatives for their conservative beliefs, when the reality is the IRS was targeting people who were trying to cheat the tax system, trying to use these 9/12 groups and these Tea Party groups and all of these these quote unquote education groups, where just political organizations, to get around paying taxes. Now, for me, I've always said none of these, the nonprofit world that we've allowed to grow up around us should be destroyed. You want to fund an ideological campaign, you pay taxes. You want to fund a church, I think you should pay taxes. I don't think it would stop people from doing these things, but we wouldn't be paying for it. And I don't hear anybody screaming about that, and I think we should. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Sarah Burris is going to be here from Raw Story to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Back after this.
This morning we declared a national emergency for only the third time in our history.
Back-to-back extreme weather disasters trigger national state of emergency in New Zealand.
There's many ways in which the ice can change, and we're seeing all of them.
New studies find global warming is melting Antarctica's ice. Plus,
this train apparently was not considered a high hazardous material train. This is absurd.
Growing concerns about safety for residents near Ohio chemical train derailment.
All of those concerns and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So where's the EPA? If they say my plastic straw is destroying this country, then they must be all over a cancer-causing gas bomb in the Ohio River Valley, right?
Really what we have to do is we have to make sure that our rails are safe.
Wait a minute. Why is Fox News and Marjorie Taylor Greene suddenly concerned about the EPA and toxic train spills? We'll discuss. And no, they don't say your plastic straw is destroying this country. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, this is very, very strange. It's like someone flipped a switch. Everybody over on Fox News is suddenly concerned about this train derailment and disaster in Ohio. Why is that?
Well, I think it's following a familiar pattern. Right-wing media and Republican politicians are attempting to exploit a disaster for political gain, claiming that rural white conservatives are basically being persecuted by the government's response to the Ohio train derailment.
It's those poor white people who are getting it again. I see why Fox News all of a sudden gives a damn. They're usually not concerned about the EPA. And by the way, it was Trump who rolled back Obama's safety regulations on trains that might have prevented this disaster.
Exactly. So to update, concerns are growing about safety for residents returning to their homes in the aftermath of that fiery toxic chemical train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, nearly 2 weeks ago. Ohio officials have told residents to use bottled water until testing confirms that their local water supply is safe. In a press conference, Republican Ohio Governor Mike DeWine called it absurd that the train cars were marked non-hazardous despite their toxic cargo. DeWine called on Congress to tighten regulations for trains carrying hazardous substances, seemingly unaware that the Trump administration rolled back multiple train safety rules at the railroad industry's request, including requirements for safer braking systems.
Unaware or would just like to not notice?
As of airtime, DeWine has not requested a formal disaster declaration from President Biden to release more federal resources, contradicting baseless right-wing media claims of a lackluster federal response. In New Zealand, just weeks after record rainfall triggered deadly flooding in Auckland, a massive cyclone, Gabrielle, this week caused widespread destruction across the North Island, triggering floods and landslides, collapsing buildings, and destroying transportation, power, and communications infrastructure. New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins declared a national emergency for only the third time in the country's history. New Zealand's climate minister, James Shaw, blasted the New Zealand Parliament for its delays.
I don't think I've ever felt as sad or as angry about the lost decades that we spent bickering and arguing about whether climate change was real or not, whether it was caused by humans or not, whether it was bad or not, whether we should do something about it or not, because it is clearly here now. And if we do not act, it will get worse.
New Zealand is just having a terrible, terrible time with this. 2 major disasters in just the last few weeks.
Yes, it's very difficult to recover from that. At the South Pole, the amount of floating sea ice encircling Antarctica has reached the lowest level ever recorded for the second year in a row since the satellite era began in 1979. That's according to the National Snow and Ice Data Center. In a different study, scientists trying to understand how quickly ice in Antarctica is melting say they encountered, quote, an eerily warm ocean, and found that the warming ocean and marine heat waves are eroding coastal ice shelves and carving up the underside of the important Thwaites Glacier, with major implications for rising sea levels.
Yeah, like enough ice, if it melts, it'll raise the sea levels by about 2 feet around the world.
Finally, a bit of good news. Your next washing machine and refrigerator will be much cheaper to operate in a few years thanks to new energy efficiency rules proposed by the U.S. Department of Energy, the first efficiency upgrade to major appliances in more than 10 years. Once finalized, the agency says the new efficiency rules will reduce carbon emissions and collectively save Americans about $3.5 billion a year on energy and water bills.
Oh, let the complaining begin on Fox News of how they're coming to take away their washing machines. Or something. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, on the 19th, I believe it is, the Rage Against the War group is going to hold their rally against the military-industrial complex. A lot of right-wing loony money, a lot of libertarian money going to be there. And look, Jill Stein will be there, so I'm sure there'll be some Russian money as well. We can't fund anything going to Ukraine. And my question to them is always, okay, I'm anti-war as well. I don't think we should be blowing things up and killing people. What's your solution? And look, I love Roger Waters. I love Pink Floyd. But this idea of just, diplomacy, diplomacy, great. It still isn't going to stop Russia from dropping bombs on these people's heads. Sometimes you got to ball up your digits and fight a little bit. I think Biden has done the absolute right thing, but we'll see the rage against the war machine. We're going to see them having their hissy fit on the 19th. So that'll be interesting to pay attention to. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, my good friend Sarah Burris. She's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com. Actually lives in the D.C. area. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, how are you?
So you go into the big rage against the war machine rally there on the 19th?
No, I'm going to the beach.
Probably a better use of your time.
I kind of feel like it is too. We are going to the beach for a vacay, which I'm very excited about. But it's funny though that so many Republicans and libertarians are supportive of this anti-war movement when I feel like that's what we've been talking about since we got into Iraq and Afghanistan, and we kind of were just sitting back like, this is a bad idea. At some point you're going to realize this is a bad idea.
Yep.
Several years later. What's interesting is, one of the stories that came out this week is that a bunch of, I think it was like 40 memos that George W. Bush and his national security people wrote for Barack Obama as he was coming in. 30 of the 40 have been released and are now declassified. And so they're going to be put out in some sort of, book or something. But one of the main things that he warns of is, infamously Bush said, I looked into Putin's eyes and saw his soul.
Sure.
And one of the memos basically goes, our relationship is soured. Putin is intent on taking Ukraine. He's specifically looking at Crimea. I mean, it was like every single thing that happened was in this memo. And so it's this idea that we have had two different parties, 4 different approaches to Russia, and none of them have worked. So, I mean, really, other than paying Ukraine to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them here, like, what do you do?
No, exactly. And this is where my point is. Okay, I'm with you. I'm not in favor of war, but what's your solution? Sorry, diplomacy hasn't worked. Russia has continued to do what they were going to do whenever they wanted to do it. It has nothing to do with anything that we're doing. China, same thing. They're going to do whatever the hell they want to do, no matter what we say to them. At some point, there's got to be a stick, and this is the best option. We're not sending our soldiers over there to fight. We're just giving people the ability to defend themselves, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I much prefer the idea of us not sending people boots on the ground. Any opportunity we can to avoid boots on the ground, even if it means, having an army of drones that we're piloting from like Xbox 360s all over the US. Like, totally cool with that, just as long as we can keep our people here and keep them alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting moment, and look, the thing is that we should, again, it shouldn't be partisan when you're talking about national intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
This shouldn't be a right team, red team, blue team thing,
Mm-hmm.
right, left. This should be, like, as you said, Bush was telling Obama. Obama probably told Trump. You even had Mitt Romney going, look, Russia's a threat, and everyone on the left mocked him for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the right. I mean, he was mocked all around. The right going, no, he's our friend. They give us all kinds of money. And the left was going, oh, you're crazy. He's right.
Yeah. So, and how many years later we're now facing
11.
What we've just put off for years and years and years.
And it comes down to misinformation. It comes down to the F channel and all of the right-wing blather, which is why I was happy to see that they lost in court to shut down that Smartmatic lawsuit. I'm hoping they lose their shorts. I'm hoping they lose everything. This is a multi-billion-dollar suit. I hope it shuts them down.
Oh, and the best thing that has happened today is the court filing between Dominion and Fox has been published online, and so there's like 200 pages with 200 pages of footnotes in addition to that. 400 pages of glorious, amazing emails of Fox News people agreeing that the 2020 election conspiracy, fraud thing from Trump was complete BS. They knew it was BS, and they were embracing it. And it is listening to, like, they're making fun of each other. Like, you've got Tucker Carlson fighting with Laura Ingraham, and then there's a fact checker that Tucker gets mad at, and he's like, our stock is going down, and you're just like, oh my god, this is a real conversation that they have.
Yep.
And they've got it via text, via email. It is just 400 pages of insanity.
No, I mean, they've actually documented their own treason. Because, I go back to what the question I asked earlier in the last hour, which is worse, a true believer who truly believes their BS, or someone who knows better but still spews the BS because it's profitable, it meets their aims, their ideology. And these emails from the few that I've been able to see puts all those Fox people in that. They knew better. They knew what they were doing. They knew they were using the dupes and the morons that religiously watch them to peddle their nonsense so that they could sell their products and line their pockets.
So there's two different ways to look at it. You've got the people who are the true believers. So you got to figure out, like, okay, well, what do you have to do to convince them otherwise? And being able to change somebody's mind if they have like these strongly held beliefs. There was actually a New York Times story on this, that people have this psychological part of their brain that makes them less likely to want to admit that they're wrong, even when they know that they are, and that they'll double down just based on that ego and that arrogance. And the part of, like, the Fox News people who were knew that they were doing wrong and were making stuff up, I think lawsuits like this help deter that, because then you can come back to them and be like, yes, this is morally wrong, but guess what? You're going to lose $3 billion, and there's a lot of people who are going to lose their jobs, and you may not have a show anymore. So, like, sort of forcing them to reckon with these lawsuits and have consequences, I think you have an actual chance of making change at that point.
Yeah. Now, I had someone ask me, well, they're Fox News. They're protected by the Constitution. They're news. They're the press. They sure, maybe they got it wrong once or twice or a million times, but they're still the press, so they're protected. Is that a legitimate argument?
No. That is the funny part, is that this idea that folks think that the First Amendment is absolute. It's not. It's yelling fire in a crowded theater, right? That that is your First Amendment right to free speech, actually that's a danger to society. So when something like this endangers people, you face off against these things like liability and defamation. And so if you knowingly lie, then there are very real civil consequences to that. And it might mean you're not going to prison, but you're going to have to fork over some serious cash.
Now, does that, it would just be their insurance companies that would get hit with this. Or I'm sure there's got to be a rider in there that if you knowingly violate the terms of this agreement, the insurance doesn't cover. Are we seeing any of that, or is that down the road?
I don't even know about that, because you're talking about two different companies that are looking at the billions. I don't know if that might just bankrupt their insurance company. And Fox is really the only one that can afford this. And I don't know to what extent you have some kind of insurance protection over screw ups like this.
No, not screw ups. I don't see this as a screw up. This was deliberate. They did this on purpose. It's the Les Moonves thing, saying Trump's probably bad for democracy, but he's good for ratings. So that's all they cared about. They cared about the ratings. They didn't care about being true to their viewers or being honest or laughably fair and balanced. They didn't care about any of that. They cared about the cash.
And I would love to see sort of the cost benefit analysis of that. Like, how much money did they make over the last couple of years? And was it more than what they're going to have to pay Dominion and Smartmatic?
Yeah.
At what point does it not become, financially expedient?
And then they get to play the victim card. Look at how they, because now my mind is going, now you've got me thinking in this, because Republicans and conservatives are nobody plays the victim card like they do. Nobody does the, oh, woe is me. Oh, look what they're doing to me. Nobody does that better than they do.
Nobody.
So my mind is, how they spin this to where they're now the victim because of their own actions. Kind of like the Twitter thing that we're seeing on the in Congress. All these people, look what they did to me. No, you violated the terms. You knew what you were doing. You did this on purpose. And now they're going, oh, well, look at poor me. Oh, poor me.
That's why I think the 400 pages that I referenced are really important. The more we can show excerpts of this, the more we can basically show them these hosts. They're not even news people. We can show these hosts as being a fraud. And the more we get that message out, I think the better.
And Schmucker Carlson, he's actually said they're not news, right? Wasn't that his defense?
Yeah. It was a defense that he had in, what was it? It's been a while, but his defense was, we are not news. We are
entertainment
TV personalities. Yeah. And so basically Fox's argument has been that everything in primetime on every evening, those are personalities and they're hosts. They're not reporters. They're not journalists. They're not newsmen.
Yeah. Let's see how that works out. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. I want to talk about her most recent story on evidently Trump lost for the 6th time in Georgia. How do you lose 6 times in one election?
Right. I mean, that's the sad thing is every single time we're dealing with these grand juries, and there's going to be, this has been a special grand jury, which has totally different rules. So you can't indict from a special grand jury. All of the findings have been handed over to a new grand jury that will start next month. They have the power to do indictments. Apparently there have been recommendations for indictments. And so the special grand jury decided today that no, there was no fraud in the 2020 election. No, Donald Trump did not win the 2020 election. So, that's another lawsuit he basically lost, and another court saying that he was wrong. And then we get to go to the next grand jury in March when they can say the same thing again, and then it'll be the 7th time.
Are you tired of winning yet?
So much winning with the best words. It's remarkable when you stop and think about it. Another question I think on everybody's mind,
we now find out that people are regretting the whole deep state argument. They're regretting getting on all this because they're now finally, the wheels of justice grind slowly. Now finally it's being exposed and they're going to be held accountable. No,
that's actually true. There's Lev Parnas, if you remember from Lev and Igor, the two associates of Rudy Giuliani. Lev Parnas is out of prison and he's now on home confinement. And he spoke to MSNBC yesterday and gave the most fascinating interview I have ever seen. It reminded me a lot kind of the sort of psychological after effects of Michael Cohen, where, basically coming to this realization of, holy crap, I was in a cult. And that's exactly how Lev Parnas described it. As he was like, I really truly believed. I mean, he was like, I grew up in Brooklyn. This is Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump. These were people that I trusted, and they told me that there was this deep state conspiracy and that, I had to do my patriotic duty to protect America. And I thought that I was really legitimately doing that. And slowly I started to, see Giuliani, beating down these Ukrainian politicians and all of the stuff that was going on. And it sort of, I had that realization of, oh crap, what have I gotten into? And then he was arrested and then he was thrown in jail.
Thanks, Rudy. Now, if we only, now if only Rudy would be held accountable. I mean, the people, this is my problem with all of this. And I said this on January 7th. The reality is, the dupes and the idiots who are doing the destructive stuff, who are defecating on the floor and urinating on desks and doing, that good God-fearing stuff. We're going to hold them accountable. They're going to get slapped on the wrist. But the people who are behind all this, the people who are the money, the people who funded it, the people who organized it, they're going to get off scot-free because that's how it always works. The wealthy and the powerful always seem to get away. And look, I look at this thing with Matt Gaetz.
Talk about the biggest piece of BS this week. Oh my God. I think Rudy Giuliani in Fulton County, I think he was probably one of the ones who lied to the grand jury. I would not be surprised if he ends up being indicted for that. The thing is, you can kind of, weasel your way into lying in court, but you lie to a grand jury, they're coming for you.
Yep.
I mean, that's serious business. And so they said at least one indictment out of that. So when in the case of people like Matt Gaetz, I don't get what the hell happened here, because they handed them the evidence on a platter. And I mean, the only thing folks are basically saying, the girls that would be witnesses in this case and the tax dude that would be the witness in this case are unreliable people that you couldn't put, on the stand to testify against a congressman. And I just feel like,
even a skeezy congressman.
I get that. I totally get that. I don't think that means that you should ignore justice. There should be at least some kind of trial here, because it just means that more members of Congress are gonna think that they can get away with anything.
Yeah, but now you got gun fetish Barbie going out there saying he was exonerated.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating.
My response was that GED education didn't help you find out what the word exonerated means.
Oh, bless her heart. She's had a rough week too. She went after Rachel Maddow for not being smart enough, and everybody's like, "Oh, honey, it took you 4 times to pass the GED, and she's got a Stanford BA and a doctorate from Oxford. Don't go there.
Yeah.
Don't try."
That GED is not serving you well. Finally, I want to get your thoughts on the story that came out yesterday of the Tiki Torch guy in Charlottesville who decided, and look, I said yesterday, and I got a couple of angry emails. He did us all a favor. I wasn't advocating for suicide, but did us all a favor. I questioned how it is that he got out of jail. How do you get out of jail when you are caught with 33 pounds of fentanyl?
Dude,
look, there's a guy, the story outside of Philadelphia, a guy stole 3 peppermint patties, spent 500 and some days in waiting for a trial in jail because he couldn't afford to buy. How does somebody with 33 pounds of fentanyl, how does he get out?
I mean, the only thing I can think is white guy in Arizona, because that's where he came over the border. And I mean, maybe Arizona really is just that bad at this point that white guy in Arizona gets to go out and deal with his normal life in his other state with his wife and family. It's Missouri. He's from Missouri.
Right.
But yeah, it was just a ridiculous, and it wasn't just fentanyl. I think it was like meth, fentanyl, weed, and some other stuff.
Oh, it was a whole bunch of stuff. But yet all we hear from Republicans is the border's open because those immigrants are coming in, and the Chinese are coming in at every place, not just the border crossings. They're doing all this stuff. I mean, the fear and the smear that's out there is, wow, breathtaking.
And it's sad too, because it's taking the fentanyl issue in particular really hacks me off, because it's taking the focus off of the opioid epidemic. It's basically moving the opioid problem and big pharma, over to a border issue. And they're letting pharma off scot-free for their involvement in basically pushing, crazy drugs on kids for sprains and strains. And this idea of people are we got to stop fentanyl from coming over because it's killing people. It's like, well, people aren't doing fentanyl. People don't snort fentanyl. It's the opioids that they're doing, and there's just fentanyl cut into it.
Right.
So, it's and people were dying of heroin overdoses before there was fentanyl. So we're basically shifting the blame to something else, and we're not dealing with the actual problem. And instead, Republicans keep saying, complaining like, oh my God, this is so terrible. They seized more fentanyl on the border. And it's like, do you not want them to seize it? I don't understand. Like, why is this a bad thing? And then they complain about, well, you got to think about how much they're not seizing. Do you hate ICE? Like, is that what you're saying? Like, you're not going to win here.
Yeah. No, but I found it very interesting that, here's this guy, white guy, because we're told the image that we're given, it's those, name your minority group. It's them bringing it across, on mules or however they think they're getting it in here.
Always from American citizens. I mean, it is the stats of immigrant versus Americans is ridiculous. It's all Americans that are bringing it over.
They're the ones who can get through the border crossings. That makes a lot of, because this stuff isn't coming in large numbers. Now, there are some places where it does come through underground tunnels and stuff, but that stuff, they ferret that out. Most of it's coming through legal ports of entry. Like, a white guy, bringing 33 pounds. My mind just blew when I'm 33 pounds. How arrogant do you have to be to go, yeah, I can get this 33 pounds of drugs through, the drug sniffing dogs and all that. I can see that.
And then his excuse to the cops was, well, some guy asked me to, if I would do this. And I was like, okay. Like, that was his excuse is, well, I didn't, he just asked me if I drive this car over, and I didn't ask any questions. So I didn't know what was in there. Like, oh, sure. Right.
That's a great defense.
But instead, we're beating down the mom carrying the baby in a diaper versus the guy driving 30 pounds of fentanyl in a Subaru,
33 pounds. I mean, I keep coming back to this. I mean, and this is a guy who was viewed by the Trump world as, he's out there fighting the good fight with his tiki torch and his clown outfit, good white Christian male. Yeah. Yeah.
Not so much.
Well, and we'll see. At some point, I'm sure if there is a place upstairs or downstairs, I'm sure he's answering those questions as we speak. Sad moment. But Sarah, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you when I'm back from the beach.
Yeah, rub it in. Why don't you go into the beach? While the rest of us are going to be stuck here with the Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C. I got to tell you, I'm thinking about making my way there for a quick, just to ask the question, what should we be doing that's different? If you've got a suggestion, I'm sure the president might think about it if it's a good one. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1870. That was the day the powerful labor orator Leonora O'Reilly was born to an Irish immigrant garment worker in New York City. During her lifetime, Leonora left her special mark on the labor movement as a member of some of the leading organizations of working people of her day. At age 11, she went to work at a collar-making factory. By 16, she joined the Knights of Labor. Her activism as a feminist, suffragist, and trade union organizer led her to help form a chapter for women workers as part of the United Garment Workers of America. Leonora also helped to found the Women's Trade Union League chapter in New York. Although Leonora helped to found these women's organizations, she continued to push for men's unions to open up their doors to women members. She believed it would take men and women working together to improve labor conditions. Her skill as an orator put her in great demand. At the peak of her career as an organizer, she averaged one speech a day. After giving a speech to a large union of New York telegraphers, their newsletter declared, "There is no record anywhere of a more magnificent speech than the one delivered by Miss O'Reilly." Leonora was a founding member of the organization that eventually became the NAACP. She spoke frequently about women's suffrage. In 1912, she appeared before a joint Senate committee to testify about the need for women to gain access to the ballot box, where she lived up to her fiery reputation, declaring, "You cannot and will not make laws for us. We must make laws for ourselves. We working women need the ballot for self-protection. That is all there is to it." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
There are industries that occasionally do something rotten. And there are industries like big oil, big pharma, and big tobacco that persistently do rotten things. Then there is the nursing home industry, where rottenness has become a core business principle. The end-of-life experience can be rotten enough on its own, with an assortment of natural indignities bedeviling us, and good nursing homes help gentle this time. In the past couple of decades, though, an entirely unnatural force has come to dominate the delivery of aged care: profiteering corporate chains and Wall Street speculators. The very fact that this essential and sensitive social function, which ought to be the domain of health professionals and charitable enterprises, is now called an industry, reflects a total perversion of its purpose. Some 70% of nursing homes are now corporate operations run by absentee executives who have no experience in nursing homes and who are guided by the market imperative of maximizing investor profits. They constantly demand, quote, efficiencies from their facilities, which invariably means reducing the number of nurses, which invariably reduces care, which means more injuries, illness, and deaths. As one nursing expert rightly says, it's criminal. But it's not against the law, since the industry's lobbying front, a major donor to congressional campaigns, effectively writes the law, which allows corporate hustlers to provide only one nurse on duty no matter how many patients are in the facility. When a humane nurse staffing requirement was proposed last year, the lobbying group furiously opposed it, and Congress dutifully bowed to industry profits over Grandma's decent end time. After all, Granny doesn't make campaign contributions. This is Jim Hightower saying, so, as a health policy analyst bluntly puts it, the only kind of groups that seem to be interested in investing in nursing homes are bad actors. To help push for better, contact theconsumervoice.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, with all the talk of balloons and trains and all of the idiocy that we're seeing coming out of Congress, because guess what? Congress is the Republican House is going to take their clown show on the road. Evidently, according to their secret memo that was somehow released, I'm sure they wanted it. They're going to do 15, I guess, road shows somewhere around the country, just to bring their idiocy and their craziness to an F channel near you. So big fun. The one thing we're not talking about is actually getting things done for the American people, solving problems, creating lots of them, solving them, a whole different story. And the sad thing is we've already forgotten about Tyree Nichols and the brutal murder of this guy who was just trying to go home. And again, this happens time and time again. There's a bit of outrage, and then it just goes away with no policy to move us in the right direction. And here to help maybe get us back on track and talking about this, I've asked Rachel Eisenberg to come talk with us. She's the Senior Director of Criminal Justice Reform at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. They've got a new piece out now on, hey, will this time be the time that serves as a catalyst to root out the racial injustice in policing? Rachel, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I guess that's my first question. What time is going to be that time? I mean, we said about George Floyd. We've said it. Go back. Trayvon Martin. We've gone back through all of these and said, now is the time. We've got to stop this insanity. And sadly, we don't.
I mean, you're right to express your frustration. It's something that really can't wait, and yet for some reason continues to wait. And every time we're confronted with the loss of another innocent life, we really have to question what is it going to take for us to move in the direction of real change. And what I'll say is every time the national spotlight is on policing is another opportunity. And so it is important to both honor the people whose lives are lost by continuing to fight for change, continuing to try and change policy and change culture in policing so that more people don't lose their lives.
No, I go through this all the time where there are things we can and we should be doing that we're just not. And I've had friends of mine say, well, it's a racial issue. And I agree, it's a racial issue. There's a big part of that. But it's also, for me, it's a poverty issue. Look, as a kid growing up in a housing project in the west side of Cleveland, the minority and a minority community, I watched police be abusive back then. Maybe not to the degree we're seeing now from my experience, but you saw this kind of abuse, this kind of power trip, if you will, that they have over poor people, white and black. And this should be, in my view, one of those moments where everybody comes together and goes, no, this isn't the kind of policing we want. I just fear that the racial component, stops us from getting involved in that. Or do you see it differently?
I mean, everybody should be outraged by what happened to Tyree Nichols, what happened to George Floyd, what has happened to countless others whose names were both in the headlines and those whose names were not in the headlines. And frankly, there is an issue within the culture of policing that creates this us versus them mentality, right? That, there's an insular kind of protective culture between police that really pits them against the community. And yes, of course, that is the harms done by those practices are felt most acutely and particularly in Black communities. There's, no shortage of evidence of that. And so we have to recognize that. We have to name that. We have to look for policies that change that. But we also have to recognize that there are things that are universal about the culture of policing that need to be that are part of that equation.
Right. No, you write in your piece that Black drivers account for 26% of deaths at the hands of policemen. 26%. That means, if my math is right, 74% of people who aren't black get killed aren't black. Now, you make the right point that the blacks only make up 13% of the population. So being 26% of those being killed is, obviously, double their societal weight. But, for me, this is, you go, hey, look, they're killing a lot of black people, but they're killing a lot of people. And I understand that, what we see as this brutality, like in Memphis, or in Milwaukee, there's just, I think there should be a moment where we come together and say we want better. I say this all the time. I support the police. I support law enforcement when they're not wrong. I don't think that's hard to come around to.
And I think that the vast majority of people in this country want to see a police force that is really taking crime in their communities seriously, is focusing on the things that is focusing on addressing and solving violent crime in particular, and not spending all of their time, pulling over drivers for something hanging from the rearview mirror, broken taillight. Because there's, because that's the way that, so much of policing resources are spent these days.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the profiling that goes on for nonsensical stops, it should be one of those civil liberty things that both sides understands and agrees on. And I guess I don't want to diminish the fact that that overwhelmingly, blacks are stopped more often than whites, and that these things happen. I don't want to diminish that. I don't want to make it sound like I'm diminishing it, but I want to make sure that people understand it's just not black people who end up getting killed on the side of the road at the hands of police. Now, look, sometimes, things happen, and I'm not saying every time is a Tyre Nichols moment, but, understand this happens across the board. And again, I want to try and pull people into the understand that we want police that are going to protect and serve. I still remember that being the slogan.
And I think that, what is one of the hardest things about really trying to sort of find a way to identify solutions is that, what happens every time there is, someone killed and the national outrage that follows is that more trust is eroded between police and the communities they serve across the board. And so, yes, while black communities already have, a harder time trusting police, and, and they have, there's a lot of reasons for that. That these types of horrific, violent instances of violence really just sets us back in terms of, bridging the gap between police and community.
No, you're right. And again, we kept hearing if we just had policemen who looked more like their communities. Well, the Tyre Nichols situation is, the police look just like the guy they murdered. I mean, what do you do there? For me, though, it comes back down to training. And I've made this point numerous times that, when I was younger, it was always put your hands on the hood of the car when they were arresting you. They spread your legs, they pat you down, they handcuff you, and that's how you got arrested. Now it's slam you to the ground. People laying on your legs, laying on your back, knees in your back, holding your arms down while yelling, 1,000 different commands, because that's how they're trained. There's something for me that goes, the training is wrong.
Yeah, and there are definitely, opportunities for improvements in training to get at just what you're talking about around, how you approach someone in a given situation with an eye towards de-escalation, how we can actually integrate a duty to intervene, meaning that like other officers who are around have a duty if they see something going wrong to actually step in and try and mitigate the situation. But I also have to, I have to make the point that training alone is not enough, right? We also, not only do we need training, we need policy change, and we need culture change, right? We need culture change that, we need policy change that sort of de-emphasizes police involvement
I
in
agree.
all of these low-level traffic stops, and we need culture change that connects people with the community, connects police officers with the community.
No, look, I know, a couple of policemen, and I truly believe that most cops don't want to do these horrible things. I truly believe that. I don't believe that any of these 5 cops showed up on that day, or all of the ones that got fired, and go, hey, we're going to go kill somebody today. I don't believe that. At least I don't want to believe that. But with the policemen that I talk to, they're cognizant of the reality that, the old phrase, you know what, rolls downhill. And we've done all kinds of, defunding mental health treatment. We've done all kinds of things to where we're, as a society, not dealing with our problems. And it all ends up on the back of the policemen on the street. And they've got to make snap decisions based on, how are they going to go home at night? And I completely understand that. So there's got to be a way where we roll some of this back, especially now where guns are more prevalent than they've ever been. I got to tell you, if I'm a cop pulling somebody over, I'm going to be worried too. I'm going to be concerned for my safety as well. It's not forgiving any of the behavior. It's not forgiving any of the things that we saw in those videos. But I got to tell you, I'm a little, I get the fact that they're worried for their own safety as well. And I think that has to be part of this conversation as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key ways to get at that is that, police are just responding to too much. We're asking too much of them. We're asking them to be, mental health counselors and case managers, and we're asking them to, identify everything wrong with someone's vehicle. When the reality is that there is not a need for police to interact with people as often as they do.
You're absolutely right. And I go back again to when I was younger. We didn't have as many policemen on the streets. You dealt with, you lived your life and you weren't always looking over your shoulder. What we did, especially in poor communities, white and black, is we loaded those communities up with policemen. Now, the sad reality, when I was a kid, our house got robbed probably 20 times. We called the police, they never showed up. But, now we have, I think, an oversaturation where people are starting to go, well, how are you justifying having all these police? And crime statistics not coming down. I think you're right. We've done too much policing. At least that's the thought that I've got. Am I on the right page?
I think that's spot on. There's a need to really think about when someone believes that they need assistance in our society for one reason or another, what is the right response, right? If someone is experiencing, a mental health disability, we should be sending someone with mental health training. If someone has a broken taillight, they don't necessarily need to be pulled over by an armed police officer, right? Because we know for such a small thing, there's such a high risk of things escalating.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, because I've had this argument thrown at me before, and I've actually had policemen go, okay, let's walk through this exercise. We're not going to put an armed policeman pulling someone over for a minor traffic violation. So let's say you pull somebody over for that minor traffic violation, but they have committed something of a crime, and their mind isn't going, hey, this is just a broken taillight. This is me going back to jail, and they shoot that unarmed person. How do you respond to their families? I don't know that I'm comfortable having unarmed people pulling people over. I just wish we wouldn't. I wish we had policemen that would de-escalate situations as opposed to what we saw in the Tyree Nichols videos of people who just came out and the situation was escalated from the get-go. I'm curious thought.
I mean, I think that, there's always going to be, situations that happen that are sort of outliers. I think that what we would end up seeing if you just had fewer armed police officers engaged in this type of traffic enforcement is that the people will know that there's, they're not being pulled over by police, that there's not a significant risk that they're going to be arrested because they're being pulled over by someone who's not a cop. And so that.
So like having meter maids.
That from the start would make a different reaction.
Okay, so like having meter maids doing traffic enforcement.
Right.
Because I don't know that a lot of meter maids get shot for writing parking tickets. Maybe they do. I don't have the statistics on that. So last line of questioning I've got for you. Is there any legislation that's moving forward? I know that there was some talk about the George Floyd Act. I know there was some talk about something. Now with a Republican House, I don't see any possibility of passing anything. Or do they have an idea?
I mean, I think that there are going to be efforts to revive negotiations around legislation. I share your skepticism that waiting for Congress is not going to produce the results that we need. I think that the calls are to the Biden administration to do things that are within his power in terms of how funding is flowing from the Department of Transportation for highway safety, and all of the ways that incentivizes more pretextual policing, and kind of changing the practices around their funding and grant making to limit that from happening, or to build on the executive order that the Biden administration issued last year to strengthen some of the use of force standards and things like that. And then there's a lot that can be done at the state and local level. States can pass their own legislation. We're seeing that happening around not enforcing low-level traffic stops, and can build new tools like and determine the utility of and the success rates for things like we're just talking about civilian traffic enforcement. I mean, these are all things that both can be incentivized by the federal government and can also be acted upon by states and localities.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I still come back to the training as a huge part of this, because that de-escalation, again, I think about interactions that I've had with police that have gone good and that have gone bad. And, it always comes back to the person who's in the uniform, who has the power. Are they trying to calm you down and things are going to be all right, you'll get through this. You know what you did. Or are they trying to come up and be angry and escalate situations? I think that has a lot to do with a lot of things that we deal with. But I hope we get something done. The further down the road this goes, I'd love to have you come back and share some more thoughts, because I don't think anyone wants to see the kind of videos and the kind of things that we've seen. I just don't. But Rachel, I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Rachel Eisenberg, Senior Director of Criminal Justice Reform there at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org is their website. Gonna take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1883, marking the deadliest day in Illinois mining history at the time. 74 boys and men lost their lives digging for coal in the diamond mine disaster in Braidwood, Illinois. The Wilmington Coal and Manufacturing Company owned the mine. It was located in a marshy, low-lying area. At midday, the east side of the mine collapsed from the weight of the melting snow. The combination of melting snow and heavy rains flooded the mine. Those trapped below could not open the ventilation doors against the heavy weight of the water. 2 of those who lost their lives that day were just 13 years old. One miner, John Huber, recounted his experience. I rushed as fast as the nature of the passage would allow to where I thought my sons were at work, but found that they had gone. I then yelled at the top of my voice to the men near me and made as fast as I could for the air shaft, where I knew there was a ladder and I could get out. By this time, the water was up to my armpits, and I had a hard time to get up the shaft. When he finally escaped the mine, he learned his sons had not made it out. After the disaster, it took 7 steam pumps 38 days to remove enough water to attempt to rescue the bodies. Falling rocks and accumulation of gas made recovery work very dangerous. 46 of the dead were never recovered. In 1898, the United Mine Workers of America placed a memorial at the site. The diamond mine disaster was one tragic entry of many that plagued the mining industry. During the first 2 decades of the 20th century, mining claimed nearly 50,000 lives in the United States. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Got an email from someone unknown. Just simply said, you hate policemen. And I go, no, I don't. This is not what this is about. It was that simple. You hate policemen. I don't. I respect them. You know, I have a family member who was a cop for years and years. I've had friends who have become policemen, and look, I've seen what it's done to people, the culture that has been that has involved. And I think about a friend I went to high school with, was probably the biggest pansy I've ever known. Was a guy who, you know, I used to beat him. We'd play basketball, and he was like 6'7". He was an incredible basketball player, but was weak. Was not somebody who would. If you pushed him, he wouldn't push you back. So we would play basketball, and I would just beat him, you know, constantly. Because, you know, he wouldn't drive to the lane, he wouldn't body up with anybody, and you know, he lost a lot of opportunities to go on to play college ball because he was such, he was such a wimp. Just what he was. He would not stand up for himself. And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate email on that too, but you know, do what you got to do. But he went and became a university policeman, a college cop, not even, you know, a real city cop, but a university policeman in a city. And within like 2 years, he was hyper aggressive, you know, and charged, you know, multiple times with police brutality. And, you know, I'm going, how is it that they were able to do? How is it that culture was able to get this guy who, you know? And I'll never forget the day I walked up to him and, hey, how you doing? I punched him in the arm, and he punched me back, and I hugged him. And I'm going, finally, I didn't realize what was going on. Long story very short, he ended up getting hurt on the job because of an escalated situation. And, you know, I go back to that, you know, maybe had he been that guy who was just a nice guy, you know, maybe situations wouldn't have gotten out of hand, but it was the people that he was surrounded with. So maybe choosing the kind of people that we choose, you know, sometimes plays into that. I want people who are going to de-escalate situations. I want people who are going to, you know, be decent. You know, I think about all of the times that I've had interactions with police over the years. And the people who did it well and the people who didn't. You know, there are people who, you know, look, you know what you did. We're going to write you a ticket. You know, here's how you go about it. You know, you have a good day. You know, is what it was. You know what you did. And then the people who come up and they're like, somehow you offended them personally. Like somehow, like you're a child and they're scolding you and they're escalating tension and escalating a situation that they don't have to. And again, my interactions, you know, have been mild, but I can see where, you know, if you're you know, poor, maybe a little mouthy, things can get really out of hand. Now, here's the other part of this. I'm hoping at some point we can find ground where we're no longer mistreating each other, because I look at some of the behavior by some people towards policemen and I find that absolutely deplorable as well. I'm sorry, these are people who are just doing a job, and you respect those people until they give you a reason not to. Now, again, I do believe police need to command respect by earning it, but also, you know, just their mere presence shouldn't elicit the kind of disrespect, because that just people are human. Now you call them everything but a decent human being, and what do you think they're going to be? But ultimately, I think our training, I think our recruitment, the idea that we've created this mentality that it's an us versus them, it's a war scenario. We're fighting the war on drugs, the war on crime, you know, the war on, you know, this, that, and the other thing. That it puts in people's minds that, you know, They're fighting a war. And, as my grandfather always said, look, in any situation, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. That mentality is there. The gun issue plays into this. Poverty plays into this. Sentencing plays into this. There's so much here. You can't just lay it all at the foot of the policeman. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, especially the angry stuff. You miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts, you'll find ours. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.